Today we speak of a truth many have felt, but few have named aloud. We uncover the quiet signs that reveal when your kindness is no longer being appreciated, but is being taken for granted, when your giving heart is being treated as an endless well. Because understanding these signs is not about becoming cold or guarded. It is about protecting the light within you, so that your kindness remains a gift offered from strength, never a sacrifice demanded by those who have forgotten its worth. Kindness is a gift, a quiet offering of the soul that asks for nothing in return, yet carries immeasurable value. It is the gentle way you listen when someone needs to be heard, the unseen sacrifices you make to ease another's burden, the warmth you extend even when the world feels cold. But a gift, no matter how beautiful, was never meant to become a doorway through which others walk freely without respect. It was never meant to be taken, reshaped, and used until there is nothing left of it but exhaustion. There are those who will meet your kindness with gratitude, who will handle it with care as one would hold something fragile and rare. And then there are those who will see it not as a blessing, but as an opportunity. They will take your giving nature as a signal that you will always bend, always forgive, always give more than you receive. They will stretch your generosity until it begins to feel like an obligation rather than a choice. And slowly, almost without notice, what once felt like joy in giving begins to feel like a quiet draining of your spirit. You may find yourself saying yes when your heart whispers no. You may begin to carry burdens that were never yours to hold, convincing yourself that this is what kindness requires. But kindness was never meant to silence your own needs. It was never meant to erase your voice or diminish your worth. True kindness does not demand self-abandonment. It does not ask you to stand in the shadows so that others may stand in your light. When someone uses your kindness against you, they often do so subtly. They lean on your empathy, knowing you will understand. They depend on your patience, knowing you will wait. And they rely on your silence, hoping you will never question the imbalance. But a gift loses its meaning when it is no longer given freely. It becomes something else entirely, something closer to expectation, something heavier than it was ever meant to be. There is strength in remembering that your kindness is yours to give, not theirs to take. You have the right to choose where it flows and where it stops. You have the right to say that your heart is not an endless resource for those who do not honor it. Protecting your kindness does not make you less compassionate. It makes you wise. It ensures that what you give remains pure, untouched by resentment or regret. And so, let your kindness remain what it was always meant to be. A gift offered with intention, not a door left open without boundaries. Let it be guided by self-respect, rooted in awareness, and protected by the understanding that you too deserve the same care you so willingly give to others. There is a quiet ache that settles in the heart when giving is met not with gratitude but with expectation. It begins so subtly that you hardly notice it at first. You offer your time, your care, your presence, and in return there is no acknowledgement, only a silent assumption that you will continue to give. What was once appreciated becomes anticipated, and what was once a choice becomes, in their eyes, your responsibility. And in that shift, something sacred begins to lose its meaning. Gratitude is the gentle balance that keeps kindness alive. It is not about grand gestures or elaborate words, but about recognition. The simple understanding that what is given did not have to be given at all. When someone receives without ever pausing to appreciate, they slowly begin to see your kindness as something ordinary, something expected, something they are entitled to. And entitlement has a way of growing. It does not remain still. It stretches, it reaches, it asks for more, even when more has already been given. You may find yourself doing things you never planned to do, giving in ways you never intended, because their expectations have quietly expanded beyond your comfort. And when you hesitate, when you begin to pull back even slightly, there may be confusion, disappointment, or even blame directed at you, as if your kindness was a promise you were never allowed to break. But kindness was never meant to be a contract written by someone else's demands. There is a difference between someone who values your presence and someone who relies on your absence of boundaries. The one who values you will notice your effort, will appreciate your time, will understand when you cannot give more. But the one who takes without gratitude often measures your worth by how much you are willing to sacrifice. To them, your limits feel like a loss, not because they care for your well-being, but because they have grown accustomed to your endless giving. It is important to recognize that constantly giving without acknowledgement can quietly erode your sense of self. You begin to feel unseen, unheard, and unappreciated, even as you continue to pour into others. And the danger lies not just in what they take, but in what you begin to lose: your energy, your peace, your sense of balance. No act of kindness should leave you feeling empty. You are allowed to expect gratitude, not as a demand, but as a reflection of mutual respect. You are allowed to step back when giving becomes one-sided. And you are allowed to remind yourself that your kindness is not an endless supply for those who never learned to value it. When you begin to honor your own limits, you do not lose your kindness, you restore its true meaning. Let your giving remain intentional, not automatic. Let it come from a place of strength, not pressure. And remember, those who truly value your kindness will never make you feel as though it is something they are owed. There is a quiet erosion that happens when your no is treated as though it carries no weight. It does not arrive loudly, nor does it announce itself with force. Instead, it slips into your life in small, almost unnoticeable moments: when you decline a request and are asked again, when you express a limit and it is gently pushed aside, when your hesitation is met not with respect, but with persistence. And over time, what begins as a simple disregard grows into a pattern where your voice feels less like a boundary and more like a suggestion others feel free to ignore. A boundary is not a wall meant to shut people out. It is a line drawn to protect what lives within you. It is the quiet declaration that your time, your energy, and your well-being matter. But there are those who will hear your no and treat it as a challenge rather than a decision. They will negotiate with it, question it, and at times completely overlook it, as if your comfort is secondary to their desire. And in those moments, the issue is no longer about the request itself. It is about the lack of respect for your autonomy. You may find yourself explaining your reasons, softening your tone, or even apologizing for setting a limit, hoping that if you make your no more palatable, it will finally be accepted. But a boundary that must be justified again and again begins to lose its strength. It becomes something you feel pressured to defend rather than something that is naturally honored. And the more it is ignored, the more you may begin to question whether you are asking for too much, when in truth, you are only asking to be respected. There is a difference between someone who understands your limits and someone who seeks to outlast them. The one who understands will hear your no and adjust with grace, recognizing that your needs are as valid as their own. But the one who ignores your boundaries often sees them as temporary obstacles, believing that with enough insistence, you will eventually give in. And when you do, even if it is out of exhaustion rather than willingness, it reinforces the belief that your boundaries are flexible, that your no is not final. This is how kindness begins to be used against you, not through force, but through quiet persistence that wears down your resistance. You start to give not because you want to, but because it feels easier than standing firm. And in doing so, you slowly move further away from your own sense of balance, sacrificing pieces of your peace to maintain a harmony that was never truly mutual. But your no is a complete sentence. It does not require decoration, explanation, or apology. It is a reflection of your awareness, your limits, and your self-respect. When someone chooses to ignore it, they reveal not your weakness, but their unwillingness to honor you. And recognizing that truth is not an act of defiance, it is an act of clarity. You are allowed to stand firm without guilt. You are allowed to choose yourself without fear of disappointing others. Because the people who truly value your kindness will never ask you to abandon yourself to prove it. They will meet your boundaries with understanding, not resistance. And in that understanding, your kindness will remain what it was always meant to be, freely given, never taken. There is a particular loneliness that does not come from being alone, but from realizing that the people you show up for do not show up for you. It reveals itself in quiet, unmistakable ways. They call when they are in need, when their world feels heavy, when they are searching for comfort, guidance, or rescue. And you, with your open heart, answer. You listen, you give, you hold space for their pain as if it were your own. But when the weight shifts, when it is your turn to need, the silence that follows can feel louder than any words ever spoken. At first, you may try to explain it away. You tell yourself they are busy, that life has simply gotten in the way, that perhaps they do not realize how much you need them. You offer them the same understanding you so freely give, even when that understanding begins to cost you your own sense of worth. But patterns have a way of revealing truth. And when someone consistently appears only in their moments of need, yet fades in yours, it becomes clear that the connection is not as balanced as it once seemed. True connection is not measured by how often someone reaches out when they are struggling, but by whether they remain present when you are. It is easy to stand beside someone when you are the one receiving. It requires a deeper kind of care to stay when you are the one asked to give. And those who only arrive with empty hands and leave once they are full often see relationships as a place of convenience, not commitment. You may begin to feel hesitant to share your own struggles, not because you are strong, but because experience has taught you that your vulnerability will not be met with the same care you offer. You become the listener, the supporter, the one who holds everything together, while quietly carrying your own burdens alone. And over time, this imbalance begins to shape how you see yourself, making you feel as though your pain is less important, less deserving of attention. But your struggles are not meant to be hidden simply because others have chosen not to see them. Your voice is not meant to be quieted because it was once unheard. The absence of their presence in your difficult moments does not diminish the value of your experience. It simply reveals the limits of their willingness to stand beside you. There is a difference between someone who cannot always be there and someone who chooses not to be. One will make the effort when it matters, even if imperfectly. The other will remain distant, only returning when they need what you have always given. And recognizing that difference is not an act of judgment, but an act of awareness. You deserve relationships where presence is not one-sided, where care flows in both directions, where your moments of struggle are met with the same compassion you have so freely given. And understanding this does not mean you stop being kind. It means you begin to choose where your kindness is placed, ensuring it is shared with those who see you not just in your strength, but also in your need. There is a subtle kind of pressure that does not raise its voice, yet weighs heavily on the heart. It comes wrapped not in demands, but in disappointment, in silence, in carefully chosen words that make you question yourself. Guilt, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a quiet instrument of control. It whispers that you have not done enough, even when you have given more than you ever intended. It convinces you that choosing yourself is somehow a failure rather than a necessity. You may begin to notice how your decisions are met with reactions that seem disproportionate to your actions. A simple refusal is followed by hurt feelings, by distance, or by reminders of all that you have done before, as if your past kindness has now become a debt you must continue to repay, and so you give again, not out of willingness, but to ease the discomfort placed upon your conscience. In those moments, your kindness is no longer free, it is being guided by the fear of letting someone down. This is how guilt reshapes generosity. It turns your natural desire to help into an obligation that feels difficult to escape. You may find yourself over-explaining, over-apologizing, and overextending, trying to prove that you are still the person they expect you to be. But beneath that effort lies a quiet truth. You are no longer giving from a place of peace. You are giving to avoid conflict, to maintain approval, to silence the feeling that you have done something wrong. There is a difference between empathy and emotional pressure. Empathy allows you to understand another person's feelings without losing sight of your own. But when guilt is used against you, it blurs that line. It makes their needs feel urgent and yours feel optional. It teaches you to prioritize their comfort at the cost of your own well-being, until your limits begin to feel like acts of selfishness rather than acts of self-respect. You might start to carry a sense of responsibility for emotions that were never yours to hold. Their disappointment becomes your burden. Their expectations become your measure. And without realizing it, you begin to shape your actions around how to keep them satisfied, even when it leaves you feeling drained and unseen. This is not kindness. It is a quiet surrender of your own needs. But you are not responsible for managing every feeling that arises in someone else. You are not required to sacrifice your peace to protect another person's comfort. True connection allows space for honesty, even when that honesty includes saying no. It respects the idea that both people have limits, and that those limits deserve to be honored without punishment. When you begin to recognize guilt for what it is, you reclaim something important. You start to see that your worth is not defined by how much you give or how often you agree. You understand that kindness guided by pressure loses its meaning, while kindness guided by choice remains powerful and true. You are allowed to give without being controlled. You are allowed to care without being consumed. And most importantly, you are allowed to step away from any situation where your kindness is no longer respected, but quietly demanded through the weight of guilt. There is a point in giving where exhaustion no longer feels sudden, but gradual, as if it has been quietly collecting itself over time. You wake up with it. You carry it through your conversations. You feel it even in moments that should bring you peace. It is not always loud or obvious, but it is constant, a heaviness that settles in your spirit when your energy is being poured out faster than it is being replenished. At first, you may not recognize what is happening. You only notice that you are more tired than before, that your patience feels thinner, that your joy takes longer to return. Yet despite this quiet depletion, you continue to show up. You answer messages when you are drained. You listen when you have nothing left to give. You help, you support, you extend yourself again and again, believing that your effort is still making a difference. But there are relationships where effort is never measured in gratitude, only in expectation. No matter how much you give, it is never quite enough to fill what is always being asked of you. The requests do not lessen. The demands do not soften. Instead, they adjust themselves around your capacity, stretching just enough to keep you engaged, but never enough to allow you rest. And slowly, without anyone needing to say it directly, you begin to feel as though your role is to keep giving, regardless of how empty you become. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from giving too much without balance. It is the exhaustion of always being available, always being understanding, always being the one who holds things together, and yet, in return, there is no sense of fullness coming back to you. No moment where your own needs are held with the same care you offer to others. You may begin to question yourself in these moments. You may wonder if you are simply not doing enough, if perhaps you need to try harder, give more, be more. But the truth is not found in increasing your effort. It is found in recognizing imbalance, because when your presence is only valued for what it provides, rather than who you are, no amount of giving will ever feel like enough. Healthy connection does not leave one person consistently depleted while the other remains untouched. It moves in rhythm. It breathes in both directions. It allows space for rest, for reciprocity, for mutual care. And when that balance is missing, even the strongest spirit begins to feel worn down by the weight of constant giving. There is wisdom in noticing when your energy is being consumed rather than respected. It is not a failure to acknowledge that something is taking more from you than it returns. It is clarity, and with clarity comes choice. The choice to step back, to pause, to reconsider where your time and energy are truly going. You are not meant to exist only as a source of support for others. Your energy is not an endless supply meant to be drawn from without care or consideration. It deserves protection just as much as it deserves expression. And the moment you begin to honor that truth, you begin to understand that peace is not found in endless giving, but in balanced exchange. There is a quiet shift that happens when compassion is no longer received as a gift, but reshaped into something you feel you owe. It does not always begin with pressure. Sometimes it begins with praise. You are the only one I can rely on, or no one understands me like you do. At first, these words may feel like trust, like closeness, like being valued, but over time, they can become a subtle binding force, tying your kindness to an unspoken expectation that you must always be available, always be understanding, always be the one who gives. What once flowed naturally from your heart begins to feel directed by someone else's needs. You are no longer simply choosing to help, you are being gently positioned as the person who must help. And when you do not, even for a moment, there is disappointment that feels personal, as if your absence is not a boundary, but a betrayal. This is how compassion begins to lose its freedom. It is no longer an offering, it becomes an assignment. You may notice how your empathy is carefully remembered only when it is needed. They recall your kindness when they are struggling, but forget it when you are the one who is tired. They highlight your understanding when they need forgiveness, but overlook your limits when they are asking for more. And slowly you begin to see a pattern where your goodness is not fully seen, it is selectively used. In these dynamics, obligation is not always spoken directly. It is implied through tone, through expectation, through repetition. Over time, you may even begin to internalize it yourself. You start to believe that stepping back makes you less caring, that saying no makes you less kind, that protecting your peace somehow makes you less good. But this is where the distortion lives, because real compassion does not require self-erasure. True kindness does not demand that you empty yourself for the sake of others. It does not ask you to ignore your own exhaustion, your own boundaries, your own need for rest. Yet when compassion is twisted into obligation, you begin to feel guilty for having limits. You start to measure your worth by how much you endure, rather than how honestly you live within your capacity. There is a difference between being compassionate and being consumed. Compassion allows you to care deeply without losing yourself. Obligation disguised as compassion slowly removes your choice from the equation. One leaves you grounded, the other leaves you stretched thin, always reaching, never resting. You're not meant to prove your goodness through depletion. You're not meant to earn love by exceeding your limits. and you are not required to remain in spaces where your empathy is only valued when it serves someone else's needs. When you begin to see this clearly, something important shifts. You start to recognize that real care respects your boundaries as much as your presence. It does not punish your no. It does not guilt your distance. It does not rewrite your kindness as something you owe. And in that understanding, your compassion returns to what it was always meant to be, not a duty forced upon you, but a choice you are free to make with a heart that is still whole. There is a quiet heartbreak in realizing that respect does not always accompany consistency. You show up with sincerity again and again, offering kindness that does not depend on mood or convenience. You remain steady even when others are uncertain, patient even when situations become difficult, understanding even when you are not fully understood. And yet, in return, there are moments when your presence is taken for granted, as if reliability has somehow made you less deserving of appreciation. Respect is not always taken away loudly, more often it fades in subtle ways. It is in the interruptions when you are speaking, the assumptions made about your time, the casual expectation that you will adjust your plans without question. It is in the way your efforts are acknowledged briefly, then quickly forgotten, as though what you give is simply part of the background rather than something intentional and meaningful. And over time, these small moments begin to form a pattern that speaks louder than words ever could. You may find yourself continuing to give, believing that consistency will eventually be met with equal regard. You show up hoping that your steadiness will inspire the same in others. But respect is not something that grows automatically in the presence of kindness. It must be chosen, practiced, and offered in return. Without it, even the most genuine care begins to feel one-sided, as if your presence is valued for what it provides, not for who you are. There is a difference between being needed and being respected. To be needed is to be relied upon for what you can do. To be respected is to be valued for your presence, your boundaries, your voice, and your humanity. When respect is missing, kindness becomes transactional without being acknowledged as such. You give and it is accepted, but not honored. You help and it is received, but not truly seen. This imbalance can slowly shape how you see yourself. You begin to question whether asking for respect is asking for too much. You may soften your voice, minimize your needs, or ignore your discomfort just to maintain connection. But in doing so, you start to move further away from your own sense of worth. Because when your kindness is constant, but your respect is absent, the relationship is no longer rooted in mutual recognition. It becomes habit, convenience, or expectation. Yet respect is not something you earn by giving more. It is something that should exist alongside your giving from the beginning. It does not require perfection, only acknowledgement. It does not demand overextension, only awareness. And when it is truly present, it changes everything. Your kindness is no longer overlooked. Your presence is no longer assumed. Your voice is no longer secondary. There is strength in recognizing when respect is missing, not to become bitter, but to become clear. Clarity allows you to see where your energy is being valued and where it is simply being used. And from that clarity comes choice, the choice to step back, to realign, to stop offering endlessly where nothing is being honored in return. You are not meant to shrink in order to be appreciated. You are not meant to stay silent in order to be accepted. And you are not meant to prove your worth through constant giving while being denied the simple dignity of respect. There is a quiet realization that arrives after you have given your best for too long to places and people who were never truly capable of valuing it. It does not come all at once. It unfolds slowly, almost gently, until one day you notice that what once felt like purpose now feels like depletion. You remember the effort you made, the patience you held, the understanding you extended, even when it cost you your own peace. And yet, despite all of it, something essential is missing: the sense that your presence was truly seen, truly appreciated, truly valued. To be used rather than valued is a deeply unsettling experience because on the surface, the difference is not always obvious. You are still spoken to, still included, still called upon when needed. But beneath that surface lies a painful truth. Your worth is measured only by what you can provide. Your emotional labor, your time, your energy, your willingness to stay present in difficult moments, all of it becomes expected rather than cherished. And when something becomes expected, it often stops being appreciated. You may find yourself reflecting on how much you have given, trying to understand where things shifted. You gave your best in conversations where you were never fully heard. You gave your best in relationships where your needs were quietly placed at the bottom of the list. You gave your best even when your inner voice asked for rest, for space, for care. And still, there is a lingering feeling that none of it was enough, not because it lacked value, but because it was never truly received with value. This is where confusion often begins. You start to question yourself, wondering if you're asking for too much, if your expectations are unreasonable, if perhaps you should simply give more. But giving more does not correct imbalance. It only deepens it. Because when your best is consistently met with indifference or expectation, the issue is not your effort, it is the lack of recognition for it. Being valued means your presence matters, even when you are not actively doing something for someone else. It means your kindness is appreciated, not assumed. It means your boundaries are respected without resistance, and your efforts are acknowledged without silence. But being used creates a very different reality. In that space, your worth becomes conditional, tied to how useful you are in the moment, rather than who you are at your core.